We'll move on to our 6.10, which is our 1 o'clock item. It's a public hearing, consideration of ordinance to amend Chapter 21, Article 27 of Lake County Code regarding commercial cannabis regulations. This is continuation from March 10th of 2026. We have our director, Mireya Turner, and staff also here to present this item. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Director Turner.
Thank you, Mireya Turner, Community Development Director. This item was Article 27, amendments specific to cannabis-related businesses, was last seen by this board on March 10th. At that time, the board asked for a few additional additions to the draft ordinance, as well as directed us to take some time to have discussions with the air pollution control officer with the Air Quality Management District, which we did. And I will just highlight some of the new things. They're all the second set of bullet points on page 1 and 2 of your staff report. And we'll go over the amendments so far. Additionally, just so the board knows, this is not technically a first reading because we're still not certain where the board falls on a number of items such as setbacks specifically. And so we'll be able to have a better draft or a accurate and updated draft ordinance at the next hearing, hopefully. Additionally, I am also working on a red-line version of Article 27 so that you can see the changes in their entirety in Article 27 and also Article 19, and I'll cover that in a moment. So, some of the additions from last meeting. A reduced canopy request. This was a discussion at the board as to how low can a reduced canopy request go, noting that it seems ridiculous to have a plant, so somewhere higher than that. So staff thought about it for a little while, and the lowest available amount at the state level is the Type 1C cottage. So that would be 2,500 square feet outdoor and mixed light, or 500 square feet indoor. This is the lowest at the state level. And so staff offers this to the board as the lowest possible threshold for a reduced canopy year here as well. Additionally, I do have a few different pieces of information, and so I'm happy to answer questions from the board as we go.
Yeah, go ahead, Supervisor Hahn.
I had notes on that. Thank you. I had notes on that, and I would say, from my perspective, I would think that it should be in accordance to what their allotted amount is. So maybe at a not less than 25%, because with the smaller portion, that's going to just end up being like, for the cottage, that's just going to be maybe a couple $100 worth of taxes, correct?
I don't do taxation.
So anyway, I'm thinking that a percentage would probably work better. Did you have something to say? Are you going to correct me? But I'm thinking like down to 25%.
Okay.
Would be a thought.
So 25% of approved total canopy. Do we have?
Supervisor Sabatier, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a comment, since we're commenting on that. I struggle forcing any business to be active if they don't want to. They have 2 years, no activity, you lose your permit. That's what you had mentioned last time, that if there is no activity, no operation of a use permit, not just cannabis, but any use permit, that use permit automatically expires if there is no operations.
Correct.
So I think you shouldn't force a business to do business. That's not our job. And we can say out loud, we want your money, but really we shouldn't be saying, no matter what your life situation is, we're going to force you to cultivate because we want your money. Like that I think we leave it to them, and If they don't grow for 2 years, they lose their permit. They know that, so they're not going to do it more than 2 years. And if they want to do a small amount, so they do a small amount. I think that we're getting in the weeds. If we're going to control the percentage of activity minimum, I struggle with that.
Supervisor Pyska?
I think we should align with the state in every way so that it makes it easier. We're not working with different goalposts, and the state has a minimum of 2,500 square feet.
Well, but that's just the license that has the minimum square
That's
footage, right? It's not, you're forced to.
My understanding is that you are able to do a reduced canopy year at the state level as well by telling them the amount that that you intend to cultivate that year.
Because that's the license type, and the license type still doesn't say you're forced to do 2,500 square feet. It's just that's the smallest license type.
Correct.
I can concur with, actually, I found my notes finally. I did have the 25% of the permit reduction, but I also had the 2 consecutive years, and the project permit would be voided
Correct. The
or
opt-out-
reduced to, if you're doing it at a percentage. I would be willing to go with the not requiring for 2 years.
I'm getting a little confused. Let me make sure I understand. So currently, we have opt-out and reduced canopy options available to our permittees. The board, in their discussion last time, was speaking about where would be the appropriate amount for reduced canopy to make sure, because the purpose of reduced canopy is to be able to cultivate less, but still remain active. It doesn't count as your year one of opt-out or inactivity. And so the board conversation at that time was, what is the lowest that we would accept for a reduced canopy year, knowing that this is not the same as an opt-out year? So if I'm hearing correctly from Supervisors Sabatier and Owen, we shouldn't have a minimum on reduced canopy. Is that correct?
I was feeling with the reduced canopy, 25%.
25%.
Yes, or the opt-out. But if it went on for 2 years, or then if you went, it would affect their permit if they reduced for more than 2 years?
No, that would not necessarily reflect their permit because it expires with inactivity, not reduced activity.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a way of keeping your permit active.
And with the opt-out over 2 years, I agreed that we would,
That's automatically.
And that's why, right, the draft ordinance does have wording saying you can't do opt-out 2 consecutive years. You can do opt-out and then skip, not do an opt-out, and then do another opt-out, and then skip, and then do another opt-out. But you can't stick 2 opt-out years together because your permit will expire.
okay, so question on that for clarification. If you do opt-out and then the next year you come back, does it need to be at full scale, or can it be reduced?
There is no minimum, there is no requirement limiting doing an opt-out 1 year, reduced canopy the next year, reduced canopy or opt-out the third year. There's nothing prohibiting that at this time.
Okay, I think that should be addressed.
Did you have something else?
So, I mean, I think we should just stick with kind of what we've been talking about for a long time, and that is 2 consecutive years of opting out. We do need to define what the minimum is if there's a reduced canopy. And any way that we can align with the state saves all of us a headache.
What exactly is the problem if they grow
1 plant.
10 plants, 1 plant? Don't you get paid by them to do an inspection? Don't they have to pay for the state license? Don't they have to pay for everything that we do? It's not, I just,
But is it a percentage of the crop?
if you are running a business and you're growing 1 plant, like, that's just weird because you're going to have to pay a whole lot of money for all of this process to happen. I think we're getting in the weeds of a business operation that is, out of all the problems that we have, we should be talking about setbacks at this moment in time, not what's the minimum amount. Like we want you to grow more. but yet we're talking about odor at the same time in this conversation. So I'm a little confused. Like, we should not be running someone else's business. We shouldn't be forcing them to do anything. If the state says you have to do a 2,500 square foot permit, that doesn't mean they have to grow a 2,500 square foot permit. They can grow a plant. We're going to ask them to pay us to do the inspection. We're going to ask them to pay us to review their performance review. I'm not quite sure what the problem is, other than we're not collecting as much money as we'd like to. And again, either we say that and we figure that out, or we say there's really not a problem with this. I'm confused as to what we're stepping into.
We are open to whatever board consensus there comes up. How about if I table that one for now and we keep going? Okay.
Not an easy win.
We'll just let that sit. Reduced canopy and opt-out missing deadlines to file. We are currently working with County Council regarding fines for missing that June 1st deadline. And again, that June 1st deadline is important because it helps to inform our staff as to what type of annual compliance monitoring visit we're going to perform that year, as well as assist the tax collector's office in assessing their taxes for cultivation. Reduced canopy compliance monitoring site visits for mixed light and indoor cultivation. We're coming back with a required 2 site visits during the year for mixed light and indoor. The discussion here at the last meeting was regarding how you can't really see if they're doing a reduced canopy because they could be getting multiple crops during the year. And so this is, we increased it to 2 so that it wouldn't put too much of a burden on staff, but would increase the oversight for compliance. Annual inspection reports, public access. This is more of an internal process to be able to post annual compliance or annual performance reports online so that the public can access them. This was a suggestion from the board in response to making sure that we're synthesizing all of the reports as they come in and presenting them to the board. Rather, now they'll all be available to the public except for proprietary information.
I'm sorry, what was the, you said that was for inspection reports?
Annual inspection reports, public access.
Okay, and did that include the performance as well?
Yes. So the annual inspection, so you're right. The performance management plans or the annual performance reports would also become public information, except for proprietary information
Okay,
and further redaction for background checks.
perfect.
Thank you. Cannabis retail permitting requirement. The board requested that we add the minor use permit in C2, Community Commercial Zoning District, and that will be added to the draft ordinance. That's why we're actually adding Article 19 into the draft ordinances, or the draft ordinance now, because that has C2 where it's currently listed as a use permitted without a minor or major use permit.
Okay, we have a question.
Now, I don't remember when we started this conversation. Maybe that was the previous board, but I thought C2 and C1 were both supposed to be minor use, not just C2. Because C1 is major use, C2 was by right. We just kind of smushed them together and said it's a minor use.
I'm happy to make that change to the board. Our meeting, or at the last meeting, the C1 was the only one discussed. But I'm happy to change C2 was discussed, thank you. But yeah, we can change C1 from major down to minor, should the board have consensus on that.
Yeah,
Right.
sounds like you have it.
No problem, we'll add that in. And then that'll bring in Article 18 as well, so we'll add that to the draft ordinance. Surety bond, where we will add the $5,000 surety bond with County of Lake listed as the, don't know how to say that word, obligee. Thank you. Odor impacts. We had a couple really interesting meetings with Doug Gearhart with Air Quality Management Control District. A lot of the studies and information he sent was specific to industrial hazards, not really cannabis. We also continued further research, including from Yolo County. And from the discussions that we had with Doug, as well as the information that we found at Yolo County, there are a number of other criteria that could be implemented to help mitigate and minimize odor impacts to offsite residences. These could include your site selection and layout, making sure that you've got some topographic or some vegetative distancing and barriers between the cultivation site and offsite residences, using the prevailing wind analysis, using other things such as establishing vegetative wind breaks, shelter breaks, or fencing, staggering the planting and harvest to avoid having your entire crop all ready at one time. So that minimizes and staggers the odor impacts over the year. And then making sure that you manage your waste in a manner such that it minimizes odor impacts. Additionally, Yolo County requires an odor management plan that establishes or proves how a cultivation site will have less than or no greater than a 7-to-1 ratio, 7 parts clean air to 1 part odorous air. And it does that using a wind analysis, odor analysis, and odor report. And it also requires it to be done similar to our site plans. It requires them to be done by a professional engineer, a qualified odor professional, certified industrial hygienist. And so those professionals, including with the involvement of an enrollment with the Western Weather, what's that called? Western Weather Group, as a manner of building data for the future to establish wind patterns should we get odor complaints in the future to help us better understand. So that would be supplying us with data. Additionally, within this staff report is a repeat of the inverse square method of deriving or calculating setbacks based on both a 100-foot and an 800-foot from a 10,000 square foot canopy. So I present these things to the board with the purpose of having a robust discussion to sort of see where the board is thinking to go, and we will modify the ordinance accordingly. I think that's the end of my bullet pointed segment. Yes. Additionally, at the request of the board, we did include the farmland protection zone boundaries in this part just as an informational part, but we also do intend to attach it to the draft ordinance.
We have a question.
Farmland protection zone, I didn't see anything in my district, District 1. I know we've had some requests. But I know that I believe in the eastern part, like High Valley area, there also isn't any. It's something I'd like to know, why we weren't considered down in South County. Is there go ahead.
So I know that I worked with prior Supervisor Rob Brown and Brenna Sullivan, the prior Executive Director of the Farm Bureau. The reason that the farm protection zone happened is because we had a wording that said you're allowed to grow outdoor on prime farmland. Maybe it was just and farmland of importance. I think it was a few different titles. If you are isolated and not part of a larger network, and certain areas were confusing as to whether they were part of a greater network or not. And so what we did is we mapped out every single permit that had been approved, and we decided to make circles around areas that were prime farmland areas, and so this is why we got the Scotts Valley area, we got the Upper Lake area, we got the Big Valley area, and the Red Hills. In similar fashion, it almost follows a similar like Sigma perspective of where there's high density agriculture happening and water usage. I don't believe that there was a Sigma for the High Valley area or for the South Shore area, Middletown, Hidden Valley area. But that was the unfortunate scenario of trying to salvage what needed to happen, and the map is so much easier to figure out what we mean by a large network of agricultural areas versus putting it in words and getting people's different interpretations. And so that's why at that point in time, there was nothing to save in the Middletown, Hidden Valley area and nothing to save in the High Valley area.
And what would need to be done to be included in some of the farmland protection zones?
A decision from the Board of Supervisors.
The board would have to approve a modification of that ordinance to include additional areas within that map.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Anything further? Right.
Let's see, farmland protection zone. I think that was it, was my question on being excluded. So, thank you.
Sorry.
Okay. Did you have more, Supervisor?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the farmland protection zone. I wasn't sure if it was planned to be put within the 1,000-foot setback, where right now there's cities, tribes, public lands. There is that nebulous 1,000-foot setback also around the farmland protection zone that was originally there. It seemed to have disappeared a little bit on the last iteration that we saw. I didn't see it specifically here, and I just want to make sure that it's added in that list with the 1,000-foot setback.
We will add that to that section of the ordinance. Yes.
I was looking at the list of the table of code amendments. Just being picky a little bit on page 2 at the bottom where it says type 5. Minimum acres is greater than 20 acres, but that type 5 is for anything more than 5 acres. So that minimum should be 100 acres. Type 5, the first one is less or equal to 5 acres. So I get it that the minimum is 20, because in order to do 1 acre, you have to have greater than 20 or 20 or more. But the next type 5
Right.
is for anything greater than 5. If we can turn that to a minimum of 100 acres, that would make sense.
Will do.
Then it goes down to B underneath that table, and had to look it up because it was a little confusing. AAA is, or Section 27.13 AAA is for processing.
Yes.
I mean, I want to make at least the comment regarding odor, because obviously this is why right now we're looking at a 75-foot setback, which I think was always the case. I don't think that changed.
Correct.
But then a 1,000-foot setback. There is no reason a processing plant should stink, period. It is not outside, it is inside. If you're doing indoor, if you're doing processing, if you're doing manufacturing, there are tools and there are equipment to ensure that there is no smell. So I think we need to hold folks accountable to making sure that they are investing in their facilities to ensure that that doesn't happen. There may be a momentary lapse where you open up the gates and you drop off stuff, but I know my experience that I experienced, that should not be the case. There is technology to reduce the odors coming out of a facility. There's ways to do double door systems so that you can enclose a little bit more of the building. But I think that I have not seen my expectations met. And I don't think we need a 1,000-foot setback. I think we need to say you're in violation, period, and you're going to be paying a fine until you fix your facility and make sure that the smell doesn't smell. 1,000-foot setback just seems ridiculous, and that shouldn't be the case. There was a further comment on the review of the annual report. Sorry, I'm trying to find it here. Where it still says it's supposed to go to the Planning Commission. And I forget specifically where it was. What page was this on? There it is. I guess page 9 of 12. C section, it's at the very bottom of it, C section 2713 AT5ID or 1D of chapter 21 of the Lake County Code, by June 1st of each calendar year is bolded for review by the Planning Commission. That needs to be the same as everything else. And then afterwards, I'm happy to engage and have the, sorry. I'm going to go back to AU, which I think is manufacturing. 2713 AU. Because AT is cultivation. I think AU is manufacturing. It still says that we're doing background checks on employees. I thought we were getting rid of employees and only doing background checks on property owners and applicants.
We are.
Okay.
Thank you.
And again, looking forward to having a robust conversation about setbacks.
Right, I think that was all the questions for now.
Thank you.
No, one more.
I do. Do you have a recommendation of setbacks? Because it makes it very wide open, and I'd like to know from the perspective of a planner, what is the recommendation for a setback? Because you have numbers on your memo, but it doesn't identify what you believe would be a good way to go forward.
I found the Yolo County Odor Management Plan and proving a less than or no greater than 7-to-1 ratio of impact a very compelling one, because it puts the responsibility of proving that using these studies by certified professionals to establish that the impact would not be there. And then given that, hypothetically, maintaining the setback where they are currently should work if they're proving that. Because if they're establishing that there will be no greater than a 7-to-1 ratio impact, and therefore there will be no impacts to the offsite residents, then when we start getting complaints, we go back and we do the testing there, because the applicant has established that they will not have an impact, even with outdoor cultivation. And so the purpose of that odor management plan would be to not just talk about distancing from the residents. That would be merely one of the criteria. It would also add in, these are the wind studies that we've looked at. This is why we think that we can support that there will be no more than a 7-to-1 ratio when it hits the border of the project parcel. And that's holding them accountable to that in a manner such that we've had difficulty grappling with by just talking about vegetative screening.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
And I like that, I think, because my biggest concern is, and I'm not an expert on figuring all that out, but, the complaints on the odor impact is what I get the most of. So I just want us to do the best job that we can to try to figure out how to make sure that they have the appropriate systems not to have these impacts on the neighbors. So it seems to me that seems like a good method of trying to figure that out, and also hold the folks accountable to stay within that. Go ahead.
I think that the odor is one of the issues that we really don't have a handle on yet. And I believe that right now, San Bernardino County, I think they have a case coming forward with a lawsuit on odor. So I think getting this right and trying to figure it out is really important to be ahead of the curve, or to kind of protect us. I have one more thing. Somewhere there was maximum canopy listed
Yes.
in there, I believe.
Yes.
And I know we had talked about a maximum canopy. I think primarily because we seem to be behind the ball. We're not keeping up with the issues at this point. And I know I had mentioned removing the 10-year renewal at the beginning, and then I was for it again a little later because of so many grows being non-compliant. Kind of a solution might be something along the lines of, if they are, because I saw that you were wanting to remove the 10-year renewal and keep them in there permanently, correct?
I'm actually not clear on when you say so many grows are non-compliant, what that means.
That means when our new ordinance comes forward, we're changing the setbacks, we're changing a number of things, so there'll be legal non-compliant.
Oh, so it's not that they're operating out of
No,
compliance
no,
right
no,
now, it's that the
no.
rules would change.
Yeah,
Okay,
I know
thank you, I
exactly what I
appreciate that.
So anyway, maybe a way to kind of get around that, I did meet with some growers, and, you know, the whole point is to be fair to everybody. That's what our goal is to, this, like I said last time, this is a new industry, and we're going to have to make changes. But say, perhaps violations might trigger that, where it would have to come up and become compliant. Because I do see the challenges for those that are good growers and are not causing issues in the communities. So I'm not sure what it is, but I'm trying to learn as well.
Thank you. We do intend to continue with our annual compliance monitoring site visits with the goal of making sure that our permittees are remaining in compliance with with their conditions of approval.
Thank you.
Supervisor Sabatier.
I just wanted to at least speak, and maybe Mr. Guintovano is a better person to speak on that, but it's been brought up multiple times, the San Bernardino lawsuit. If you look at where that site is located, it is surrounded by residential areas, not rural land or rural residential with a 20-acre lot. Like, it is surrounded, it is in the middle of the city, and I think is a drastically different situation than if somebody is on ag doing ag, or somebody is on rural lands doing ag. So I think that there's some key differences there.
Okay.
As to how that would provoke us to look at it differently than just doing a apples to apples comparison, because I don't think it is.
Okay.
In fact, I think it's insane that they have that many grows in the middle of the city the way they do. It's nonstop greenhouses.
Not up to us.
All right. Do you have more?
Nope. We welcome any further questions and discussion from the board.
Before we open to the public, is there any further from the board? Not seeing any, then at this time, we're going to go ahead and open it to the public. We'll start in the room. First person, if you can come up, state your name for the record. Go ahead and come up and state your name. You'll have 3 minutes.
Okay. Hi, my name's Angie Shannon. I'm here reading a letter from my husband, Clay Shannon. My name is Clay Shannon, and I'm here today in strong support of the local cannabis industry here in Lake County. Cannabis is agriculture. It belongs alongside vineyards, pears, walnuts, sheep, pigs, goats, and cattle as part of the agricultural backbone of this county. Lake County has worked hard to position itself as a place where agriculture can grow and evolve, and cannabis has become an important part of that process. Local cannabis farmers have made significant long-term investments here. They purchased land, gone through a rigorous permitting process, paid substantial fees, and continue to contribute meaningful property tax revenue. These are committed agriculture operators who choose Lake County because the rules were clear and the environment was stable. The proposed increase in setbacks from 200 feet to 1,000 feet plus puts that stability at risk. Changing the rules after the fact reduces plantable acreage and places an unfair burden on farmers who have already complied. It sends message that investing in Lake County agriculture comes with uncertainty, and that is something we should be very careful about. I also want to address the primary issue driving this proposal, odor. The lands being discussed are agriculturally zoned. That zoning comes with an expectation that normal agriculture activities will produce odors, dust, and noise. In many cases, traditional agriculture uses such as cattle operations, dairies, or pig farms can generate far stronger and more persistent odors than cannabis cultivation. Yet those uses are permitted and protected because they are part of agriculture. This is where the right to farm principle matters. Right to farm exists to protect farmers from exactly this type of pressure. It recognizes that agriculture has impacts, and it ensures that those who choose to live in an agriculture area accept those realities. Standard disclosures already made this clear. Agriculture brings noise, dust, and odor. That is not a nuisance. That is part of nature of working the lands. Cannabis farmers deserve to be treated under the same framework. They are not asking for special treatment, just equal treatment. Beyond that, cannabis is one of the few sectors bringing in younger generations back into agriculture at a time when the average American farmer in this country is nearing 60 years old. This industry is creating real opportunities for young farmers, entrepreneurs, and working families to live and work in Lake County. If we want to revitalize our rural economy, support working lands, and keep agriculture alive for the next generation, we need to support the industries that are actually attracting people here, not restrict them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Board. My name is Richard Durham. I'm a realtor, and I'm also a cultivator. So I was reading today on the items we had here, and one of them was a suggestion on how to get rid of these odors, and that was to plant different varieties, ones that were more citrusy instead of skunky. Well, cannabis has like 30-some terpenes, so only one of them is the skunky one. So that would be kind of difficult to ask somebody to do that. And the other one is a smaller cultivation area. God, we put a lot of money into our gardens. Now you want me to make it smaller so it doesn't smell. That should have happened up front. And the other one was to change it to indoor to reduce the air. Well, you know, that's asking a lot of a grower. The other one was design or other technology. I mean, other technology would be grapes use air movers. We could move the air. Maybe get a contract with Febreze, and then we could just hook up and spray a little Febreze behind the air mover, and everybody likes that smell. And then vegetative barriers. Well, if they're natural, I agree. But if you have to put a vegetative barrier in, now we're affecting the water table, and we're already dealing with that. And so there's no real effective way to stop the odor, but when they speak of cannabis odor, it always seems to be negative. You know, most people that come to my farm really love the smell of cannabis. So I think we should take a countywide poll and find out how many people actually like the smell of cannabis and how many don't like it. But most of all, you know, during the day, there's thermals coming up off the ground. So all the odors go straight up. You know, in the evenings when it gets cold, and if you live in a canyon, sure, the odors will go down. So it's very transient. So it's really hard to put the onus on a farmer of where the odor is going to go, how long it's going to last. So I suggest that we limit the time that a grower can create odors. And out of a 12-month period, I think 2 months, they should be able to create odor. That's like from mid-September to mid-November. After that, you shouldn't be creating odors. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Board. Hello, Board. Forrest Nicola Ellie here. I'd like to read a letter that I sent in. My name is Forrest Nicola Ellie. I've been involved in agriculture for 20 years. I'm a farmer, rancher, father, and also a licensed real estate professional. I've farmed cannabis in Humboldt, Trinity, Mendocino counties, and today I operate under a small use permit here in Lake County. I've met farmers everywhere and have helped many purchase property here. They chose Lake County for one reason. The rules were clear, the permits were long-term, and there were no proposed changes to the ordinance that would affect farmers. That stability brought investment. The proposed increase to off-site residence setbacks of 1,000 feet or more puts that at risk. It affects nearly every farm I've worked with and sends one message: uncertainty. And when uncertainty comes in, investment leaves. Cannabis is agriculture, and Lake County is pro-agriculture, to my knowledge. Farmers support the local economy. They create jobs, spend locally, and keep small businesses alive. Cannabis is also bringing younger generations back into farming at a time when the average U.S. farmer is 58 years old. Increasing setbacks and turning approved projects into non-conforming use permits doesn't strengthen agriculture, it weakens it. When I started here in 2017, Lake County welcomed farmers. It supported agriculture, including cannabis. I encourage you to stay focused on that vision. Support agriculture, don't restrict it. Standard California real estate disclosures clearly state that properties near agriculture may experience noise, odors, and dust. Agricultural comes with impacts. That's understood. So the question is simple. Do we want to support a growing agricultural community in Lake County or slow it down? Cannabis is agriculture. Please continue to treat it that way. Thank you for your time. Respectfully, Forrest Nicola Ellie.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Board, Angela Amaral. I'd like to start off with, I keep hearing that there's, no non-compliance, that everybody's in compliance. And I think it's inconsiderate to continue telling your board that everyone's in compliance when they're not. One of the requirements of the current Article 27 is that inspection fees must be paid prior to cultivation. The current cultivation ordinance continues to appear as if it's not being enforced. This is 10 projects that were allowed to cultivate in 2025 without paying their inspection fees for 2024 and 2025. This is copies of their payments being made this year in 2026 after they cultivated in 24 and 25. If any of you would like to discuss this further, obtain copies, please let me know. Recently, I sent information to the board with regards to odor. I have to disagree with Supervisor Sabatier. I understand apples to apples, but this covers a 1 mile radius. Many permitted cultivation sites are approved within a 1 mile radius. So I'll just read out the letter that I had sent in case you guys haven't had time to read it yet. At a time when the county is discussing commercial cannabis cultivation size limitations plus or minus 20 acres, there are actions around the state that the board may want to take into consideration moving forward. As you may or may not already be aware, there are other County Board of Supervisor actions and court rulings that may affect how Lake County proceeds when it comes to dealing with off-site cannabis odors. In 2025, a court ruling granted a class action lawsuit to move forward in Santa Barbara County and further defined the class as all residents within a 1 mile radius of a commercial operation. The residents' lawsuit seeks damages in regards to odor and for loss of use, enjoyment of property, and loss of property values. The March 2026 court ruling, there was a link in the email that I had sent to you. Additionally, the Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors has been taking aggressive measures to address odor with possible revocations for failure to meet strict deadlines to install mitigation measures. For reference, outdoor cultivation is heavily regulated in Santa Barbara County, and some areas have bans on outdoor cultivation to protect the environment and to mitigate odors. There was also an article about their no extensions. They weren't granting extensions for the permits. Of note is the fact that the cannabis operation, the middle of this particular class action lawsuit, is a 9-acre operation. The judge has ruled that everyone within a 1 mile radius may join as a plaintiff of class. What would the potential radius be on a 20-plus acre cultivation site for a class action lawsuit? Please strongly consider instituting a 5 to 10 acre cap on cannabis projects moving forward. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
My name is Bill Wilson. I'd like to personal experience with we live next in an exclusion in a farmland protection zone, 800 feet from a greenhouse, which is supposed to be mixed light and filtered. The record here for completed greenhouses or cannabis grows says we're 1,360 feet away. I'm not sure whoever checks the records to vet the actual growth, but if we're getting significant odor that runs us out of our house, it's a greenhouse, so we're getting it at least 3 times a year. It's not one grow, there are multiple grows, 3 to 4 grows. I can't see how, if you're 200 feet away from a grow, that you're not going to get overrun with odor. And as far as the California is concerned, and the state, the county, the U.S. government says cannabis is not an agricultural product. So things do not pertain, you can't say agriculture. If you have 10 acres of cattle out there, you have to do odor control. With poultry, you have to do odor control. You have to clean up. They are required to do odor control. If you have a 10,000 square foot commercial bakery, you have to have odor control. You have to have filters. But it doesn't seem like cannabis in an open grow that is maybe 4,000 to 5,000 plants has the same recommendations. I've submitted studies from Minnesota that did livestock that said and you have to gauge it on 2 to 3 mile an hour winds, gentle winds. A high, strong wind is going to disrupt it and it's going to disturb it. But most of the problems is slow winds, and 1,000 feet distance is what Minnesota's study found should be sufficient. If you are also going with the distance by the size of your grow, if somebody's at 8,000 square feet and they are required a certain distance, does that mean they can no longer go to 10,000 square feet? Would they not be allowed to, or would the whole unit have to be moved further away? That would be a certain question if you go with the inverse square idea. And again, like that poor man down in Middletown, that his property is 200 feet away from 4 or 5 acres, outdoor grow. The California State Rule number 402, which is a nuisance law, and the California Health and Safety Code says no person can discharge air contaminants that cause injury, nuisance, or annoyance. There's no doubt that there is an annoyance from the odor. We personally have had problem with somebody recovering from surgeries and radiation that have to move out of the house because it causes headaches, it causes nausea. That's a health problem. That is not allowed. Thank you. I see my time's up.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Charles Morris. My family came to California from Arkansas, so they've been farmers their whole life. I've owned cows, pigs, chickens, the whole works. And one thing you don't do is during the heat of the summer, you don't go out and spread out that manure. You just keep it down and don't mess with it, because it will just piss off your neighbors. I mean, that's just good stewardship, and that's just good farming. Cannabis doesn't give us that right. It does stink, okay, and it does not smell well. There's been all kinds of looks, and we've looked at it in all kinds of ways. Our county sheriff's department used to go up into the hills on the Napa Lake County line. Most of the growers are on the Lake County side, but they'd go over to the Napa County side, get the water, grow it, and then they'd come down. They even took mules up in those hills. We knew they were there if we didn't even see them, because every evening around 5 o'clock, we get a Delta breeze coming up Highway 29. Okay, so it wasn't brain surgery. Didn't need dogs to go find it. It stunk. We knew it was there, and we had to do something about it. What they do, the U.S. military, they say 1,000 feet. Point Mugu Navy Air Base, the CB base, there's high agriculture in that area, but they've moved the cannabis back because the federal government says our sailors can't deal with this. All right, this is too stinky. It's fine most of the year when you got the coastal breeze, just like Lake County, when it comes to the hills off Highway 20. But it gets really nasty when they get their Santa Anas and it's blowing it straight into their face right on the coast where the Navy bases are. So I can't see anything less than 1,000 as not being reasonable if that's what we're expecting the people who go out and protect us and work for us already. And we're all paying federal taxes. Why should they get a better life than we do? And then I guess the other thing is look at the topography. A lot of the stuff that's going on down in Santa Barbara, a lot of those hills and Casitas Pass and places like that. I was born in Oxnard, California. I know Casitas Pass very well. If there's no place for the air to go, it's going to be bad. We are not the Central Valley. You know, YOLO is a no-go. YOLO is a flat place. It has a whole different climate. It's a Sacramento Valley climate. We have something that's closer to a mix between that and a coastal breeze, you know, coming off the ocean. I know near my house we have a saddle in the mountains and we get plenty of air coming through there. We used to be known for the cleanest air in the country. We know that Calpine has remedied this and they've created filters to stop that kind of rotten egg smell that was coming from the geysers. It just makes common sense that we adjust accordingly. But I would say nothing less than 1,000. If the federal government's doing it, we should do it too. If we host federal bases in this country, you know, that's it. Or in this state, we should do it. Anyway, that's all I got.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Peter Simon. I'm with the Pasta Farm Grow Up out off of Seigler Springs Road. First off, I don't envy you having to tackle this. You have some issues that are probably largely unsolvable. Cannabis, you're either going to have a cannabis industry in this county, or you're going to have no cannabis odor. You can't have both. But I will submit that if you effectively go through the process of moving all of the legal cannabis operations out of this county, you're still going to have cannabis. You're still going to have the stink that was just described. It's just going to be from a whole bunch of non-compliant growers. And my concern with this ordinance that you're considering right now is it has been rushed. I know it's not an emergency ordinance, but it's one being pressed forward, is that you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You have a process that has already been initiated in many respects to rewrite the entire ordinance. Yet what you're doing is you're coming in and you're doing a piecemeal of various components of this ordinance, trying to solve it. And I would submit that you're actually probably going to make things much more difficult. When you're passing these ordinances, the only people that they're going to impact are the compliant, good stewards of the land. The people that are not, if I may, almost every response that you've heard today that was kind of suggesting 1,000-foot setbacks, all of these things, what they talked about were non-compliant grows. You heard people talking about the failure to enforce the compliance requirements. We applaud that. We applaud the effort to try to keep people into compliance, but that can only be done if you have compliant growers. When you pass laws that are then going to effectively drive farms out, and mind you, most of the requirements that you're contemplating here will shut farms down. Our farm would be shut down. Millions of dollars of tax revenue that we've already paid will cease to come in. Hundreds of people, both direct and indirect jobs, will be lost. These are not small, these aren't threats, these are just facts, because under the ordinance that you have been considering, our farm would not be allowed to operate. I don't think that's your intention. I don't think that's what you're trying to do. What I would suggest is that you take some time and try to do this in the big overall operation of the rewrite of the ordinance. Trying to push it through right now, what you're doing is you're creating scenarios that I don't think you are intending to do. The impacts, for instance, of the setbacks have not been fully studied. You don't know who you're going to be pushing out. You don't know where they're going to be pushed out. You're applying setbacks in all of the same zoning areas. You need to be more careful. I would suggest that you should be more careful about how those are applied. I'm happy to help you in any other way, but I would really encourage you to tackle this with the big overarching rewrite of the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Patrick Sullivan, County Treasurer Tax Collector. I'm here, probably not surprised, to address the minimum square footage, the reduced canopy discussion that occurred earlier. Our office would encourage your board to think of some sort of minimum threshold. I know 25%, for instance, was mentioned, but perhaps something to that effect where if a reduction is going to go below that level, that it would be treated as an opt-out, as if it was completely inactive. We have had multiple people express that possibility that you can reduce square footage down to 10 square feet or 100 square feet, some minimal amount. And so if your board's going to consider that 2 years of inactivity as an opt-out would ultimately deactivate that permit, I think you need to have some mechanism in place to ensure that that minimum canopy is not used as a workaround for that. I would also point out that the minimum reduction or the minimum canopy reduction is an increased workload on our office. The way our tax ordinance is structured, there's basically activity or there's not activity. And if there's any activity, whether it's simply planting, digging in the ground, that's enough. Drying, harvesting, anything counts towards our cultivation tax. So when it's inactive, it's a bit easier for us to see that. Or when it's active at its permitted level, that's fine too. But it's everything in between that really takes up a great deal of our time. And it's the area that poses the most difficulty for us with audits and other investigations. So yeah, I would just encourage, I think there's a variety of options, and I'm not necessarily saying I have the perfect answer, but I would encourage you to place some kind of minimum and tie it back to that inactivity. The other thing I'd say too is, as far as the state license goes, we are pretty different from the state on the tax side. So I know that's another issue. As much as we'd like to get in alignment with the state, I think it's going to be hard to really get there. So, but where we can, I'm totally supportive of it. I'm just not sure this is one where we can. So thank you.
Thank you.
Malcolm Dunshee. It seems like such a red herring. It was never an issue before, and suddenly it's an issue. I heard last time I was in these chambers that there'd been one complaint about odor on an ag-zoned property. As a lifelong vegetarian, I take umbrage at people who have cattle and think that's nothing. And we tolerate their stench. And it's year-round, this stench. But our stench is a problem. Seems a little inequitable. And we're just trying to make a living. Just like the cattlemen. I used to live in Pupaluma. And we just made jokes about it. We didn't attack people. We didn't have hard hearts. We just went, okay, it stinks. It's their smell. We tolerate. We live together. But this seems so hard-hearted. We just want to make a living. We don't want to hurt anybody. And we don't want to be attacked maliciously. That's it.
Thank you.
Hi, Holly Harris. I just have a couple of statements, per se. In general, as a community member, we would like to see further reductions from the max 20-acre grows, et cetera. In terms of increased setbacks, we would like to see increased setbacks based on size. One thing I did want to point out, we've heard a lot of people talk about ag is ag and you have to live with the smell, et cetera. But I wanted to point out that on the spreadsheet that community development submitted, I think only 16 out of the over 100 permits were actually on ag land. Most of them were on rural lands, et cetera. Then in terms of the conditions of use, if the 10-year term limits are removed from the major use permit, We really would like to have verification that the conditions of use were fulfilled within the initial 2-year period, because basically those are mitigations that say that you can make a negative declaration. And I know for a fact that a number of the conditions of use are not, fulfilled. So we would like to see that within the 2 years if that was done. And then I did want to bring up something that someone asked me to mention, but residential subdivisions that are outside of the community growth boundary, they'd like to see some increased setback from there. And then my last thing is, I just wanted to double check, because it said annual inspection reports would be posted, but it's going to be annual inspection reports and annual performance reports, and the water usage reports will be posted online.
Water usage, oh, I'm sorry.
Does that wrap up your comments, or do you want to finish and then I can?
Yes, last time when we were here, it was brought up for 10 minutes by the Board of Supervisors that it would include water usage reports. So I'm just double checking that that's still the case. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to?
Water usage is included in the annual performance reports. Yes, that would be included.
Okay. She said that water usage was included. Next.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Supervisors, Margot Kambara. On March 10th, 2026, your board continued this agenda item. Attorneys for Tom Lasik and Margot Kambara submitted public comment on their behalf in a letter dated March 6, 2026, and addressed to your board. In this letter, the attorneys explained that the Cannabis Ordinance amendments are not exempt from California Environmental Quality Act review, as the county claims. Environmental review is required. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Board. Tom Lasik. As Margot mentioned, we stand by our letter from last month, but I did want to bring up a couple things based on some of the comments and suggestions and feedback from the board and some of the community. I do support, and I think it's a really good line that Supervisor Sabatier says, if you have a greenhouse or an enclosed structure, it should not be emitting odors, and that needs to be enforced. I also agree with the treasurer that there needs to be some sort of minimum on the opt-out threshold, because, as you can already tell, people are having conversations on how to game the system. The other thing I would add, and this is something to look into because it came in the Planning Commission, is that there was a cannabis grower, it's actually one of my neighbors, that was concerned about the opt-out because they were still trying to get their cannabis license. I think it was sort of revised that if they had their license, then the opt-out would continue or be the timing would start. But it turns out in their situation, I don't think they have any intention of getting that license. They're just trying to sell the property. I would also agree with a couple comments by a recent member. I think he just left, and another public comment that said that, dairy smells and cattle smells and pigs smell, and they should be treated the same way. And I do agree with that, but I don't think what they realize is that those odors are regulated. And those are CAFOs, so Consolidated Agricultural Feed Operations, and there are standards that have to be met. I think someone said that this is being rushed, and I think those of us who have been around this for a while know that we are now coming up to nearly 4 years on this conversation, so I don't think that's, by any stretch of the imagination, should be considered rushed. And that only the non-compliant growers are the problem. I would respectfully disagree. I have a grower next to me that I feel is a very good actor, and he's been very conscientious, yet there is an odor. Now, related to that is this idea that theoretically, the current standards should apply. I think that's tone deaf. If you have a quarter acre 200 feet away, which is about where I stand to across the street, you're going to smell it. I don't care what the science says. I'm a big fan of doing the math and doing the research and studies, but I still think there should be a minimum, a by foot threshold based on size. And then if they can show that they can get closer based on the science, then that should be allowed. But I don't think it's proper or appropriate to say, well, we'll just let the science figure it out and we'll go with that, because we know there are certain, you can't put 20 acres across the street and think it's going to be fine. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in the room?
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Autumn Carsey, and I want to speak directly to the most impactful issue in this ordinance, the proposed increase to setbacks. The jump from 200 feet to 1,000 feet from residence is not grounded in clear objective science. There isn't even a general hypothesis considered here. This is a knee-jerk reaction to complaints based on the opinions of a few residents that does not consider supporting or support existing stakeholders. It is largely based on subjective perceptions of voters, not standardized thresholds, and certainly not a demonstrated public health impact. We do not regulate other forms of agriculture this way. Vineyards, cattle operations, and fertilizer all use and produce strong odors, yet they are not subject to 1,000-foot setbacks from homes. If we applied this logic across agriculture, much of our Lake County farming would not be possible. Cannabis is considered an agricultural product. It is regulated by the California Department of Food and Agriculture, the CDFA. As such, it should be regulated with parity to other agricultural uses, not singled out with disproportionate restrictions based on public perception. If odor is the concern, then the solution should be performance-based standards that are measurable, enforceable thresholds that are achievable by farmers, not blanket setbacks that effectively eliminate viable parcels, license holders, and applicants. Applying this change to already approved projects would be devastating. These projects were permitted under existing rules after years of process and millions invested. Changes in setbacks now would retroactively undermine those approvals and cost stakeholders and the county millions. I strongly urge the county to implement non-conforming uses for all approved projects by eliminating the 10-year permits, reevaluate the 1,000-foot setback in favor of science-based performance standards while maintaining the current 200-foot standard. I also urge you to reject adopting YOLO County-style ordinance control requirements. That framework requires expansive engineered systems, certified professionals, detailed wind studies, and ongoing technical compliance, just to attempt to meet a subjective threshold. The result of that program had been increased cost, operational burdens, and it ran a lot of farmers out of that county. Third is the opt-out provision. The proposed expiration of the 2 years of non-cultivation does not reflect economic reality. Operators may need time to pause or sell in a challenging market. The rule risks forcing the loss otherwise a viable farm. Property sales in Lake County for cannabis properties can take years, or properties in general here. And then finally, the ambiguity and setbacks from public lands. I know we brought it up before, but it wasn't mentioned here today. I think the ordinance should clearly define what setbacks mean with relation to public recreation areas.
That was your timer.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Do we have anyone else in the room? Not seeing anyone. I'm going to go to online. iPhone 13 Pro, please identify yourself and you'll have 3 minutes.
Sky Lewa, Pillsbury Family Farms, and I want to talk today about what it's like dealing in this department in practice. What do you do when the Director of Community Development refuses to answer questions? Not delays them, not works through them, refuses to answer. What do you do when follow-up questions are ignored? It's not transparency and it's not accountability, it's control. When a department is ran that way, word spreads. Contractors talk, farmers talk, and investors talk. And what they're saying right now is simple. Don't come to Lake County. It's too difficult to work with community development. And it's not the public's fault, and it's not the cannabis industry's fault. It's a leadership issue. And now let's talk about background checks, since that's clearly where this is heading. If this board is going to allow community development to act on criminal matters, if you're going to allow the director to become aware of warrants and pause application, let's be honest about what that means. You are no longer operating a planning department. You are expanding this department into a potential law enforcement role without the safeguards, authority, or
Let's
accountability.
stay on the ordinance, Guy.
What we have is a system where decisions need to be made based on the information and not defined process, and no transparency and no accountability. And right now, the operators are left with experiencing is not a clear regulatory framework. It's a single interpretation that is being applied as the path forward. Meanwhile, the rest of California is moving forward. Just yesterday, the DCC reported that there is 6,419 provisional licenses that have transitioned to annual licensing, including 977 equity retail licenses, 3,614 cultivation licenses. Other counties are building pathways, and they're creating a process and growing their markets. And what are we doing here? We are making it harder to operate, harder to comply, harder to invest. And you ask why revenue is down. Maybe it's because there's less access, less clarity, and less fairness. And that doesn't grow an economy, it shrinks it. And trying to make up for it through the tax collector doesn't fix the problem. It shifts the burden onto the people who are still trying to survive it. More stores equals more revenue, more participation equals more economic activity. So the question to this board is simple. Do you want a system that the people can work with, or do you want one where they want to avoid?
Thank you. Kyle, go ahead. You'll have 3 minutes.
Oh, thank you. Kyle Bill, Lakeport resident. I just wanted to kind of express some thoughts and concerns I think that the board should consider with any type of these projects. I think there's a lot of cultural implications that could be had with any kind of project, and I just want to kind of touch on them from my individual cultural perspective. Not representing any tribal input, but I would encourage there to be tribal consultation throughout these processes to ensure that things that might be overlooked as having cultural impacts. One thing, even as what could be minimal as odor, can also have ceremonial impacts when it comes to disrupting traditional plants that might be used in ceremony. Those are just one area that kind of could get overlooked from a Western perspective, as some of these things are more of a nuisance or an annoyance, but for tribal people, it could be a disruption to our cultural practices. Also, noise. This was something that was brought up in some other previous conversations around any kind of development close or nearby cultural sites where we may continually are actively participating in ceremonies. Noise, lighting, all of those things could serve as disrupting elements when it comes to cultural practices. So I just wanted to share that perspective and those thoughts with regard to not just this topic in general, but I think it does kind of hit home on some of the areas that I wanted to touch on. But I appreciate everyone's conversations and the opportunity to provide input. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Timothy, go ahead if you can identify yourself. You'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair and members of the Board of Supervisors. My name is Timothy Kasuni. I represent Rancho Lake LLC. Rancho Lake received approval from the Planning Commission for its project on January 8th. Rancho Lake obtained a mitigated negative declaration, has been working on its application for years. The Planning Commission approval was appealed by a neighbor. The hearing before this board, I believe, is on April 21st. I've written a formal letter. I won't read it, but it is in the record. I encourage all of you to read it. The gist of the letter is this. In reviewing the draft ordinance, I don't see any protections for applicants that have not only had a completed application under the Permit Streamlining Act, but has also received the first round of discretionary approval, in this case from the Planning Commission. I think there needs to be, and the number of operations that are in Rancho Lake LLC's situation. I can't imagine there's very many, but there has to be a mechanism in this draft ordinance to protect applicants who have spent thousands of hours, including substantial amount of staff time, have a completed application, has had that application already gone through the first round of discretionary approvals. There has to be a protection afforded to project applicants in that situation. And I'm encouraged by Supervisor Owen's comments a little while ago that the goal is to be fair to everybody. Well, basic fairness, sound public policy, and to restore confidence, not that there isn't, but to maintain confidence from business owners who are undertaking substantial investments to apply for and obtain approval for these projects. Basic fairness requires some sort of exemption, and there is a template for this to be done. And there was an ordinance passed, 3103, related to cannabis and farmland protection zones. This is back in April of 2021. And there is an express provision for pathways for applicants impacted by the creation of the ordinance. That kind of pathway language really needs to be included here, or else there will be a basic unfairness. I'd encourage any questions, but those will conclude my comments. Please refer to my formal letter on this issue. Appreciate your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next. Paul, go ahead and identify yourself. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Paul Bernaccio. I submitted a letter to you guys before the meeting, but just something I forgot. Two things. One, I would ask the board to consider looking into the inspection fees, because right now the inspection fee is about $1,000 per permit, regardless of the permit size. So even like a 5-acre farm is paying the same inspection fee as like a 5,000 square foot farm, when it takes under 30 minutes to inspect one and it's going to take hours to inspect the other. So I would encourage us to look into ways that maybe the larger farms could actually subsidize some of the inspections for the equity grant holders inside the county, and just kind of make it a little more fair. And the other thing is about the odor. I live up on Cobb, and there's a large vineyard around the corner from me, and they spray with sulfur like multiple times a year. And when they do that, the whole valley stinks like sulfur. My house stinks like sulfur. Everything stinks like sulfur. Sulfur is a known lung irritant, especially around children. And I've got kids in my house where it smells like the spray. I just deal with it every year. I don't think there's really much that I can do about it, but the smell of sulfur powder is much more dangerous than just the smell of cannabis. As far as I know, and I would love to see any kind of data or information somebody has, but I'm fairly sure no one has ever gotten long-term serious illness just from smelling cannabis. There might be anecdotal evidence of people feeling ill, but nothing that is life-threatening or long-term. So that's just one thing that stuck out to me, because I do not appreciate all the spraying that is done at the vineyard near my house. So thank you.
Thank you. No more hands. I'll bring it back to go ahead and close public comment, bring it back to the board for any further comments or questions. I'm going to start with Supervisor Sabatier.
All right. I got a couple questions first. You submitted a list of projects in our attachments. Is that the full list of approved projects? Because it seems to fall off a cliff, and I know that our applications fell off a cliff. I only see 2 applications from 2023, and then it turns into a PL. I'm just kind of trying to understand what PL means versus UP or MUP.
Yes, Mary Claiborne, Senior Planner, Community Development Department. The list of projects that you have before you is the approved projects that are active and approved. We have several projects that have expired, so those are not on the list. With that, we have some more projects that are pending that are not on this list. This list is not all inclusive of the most recently approved project from March 26th.
And then, and maybe it's not possible to answer, and I might even struggle to find it, but I think there was a typo in one place where it said RA. I was just wondering if it was RR or RL. I'm trying to ascertain what the changes to our potential setbacks, who would be affected. And let me just see if I could do a... Yeah, right here on UP 1840 and Holden Reed. Is that RR, RL?
I'll take a look and confirm that.
Okay. Just because, again, I don't mind having a conversation where we can go back and forth and look into it. So I guess I'll provide my thoughts. I see zoning as being the answer to the issue that we're discussing, which is odor. I think the idea of an odor professional is kind of funny to me. And the concept of what we're asking on top of all of the studies that have already been done in order to get our current use permits, like the cost is already very high, prohibitive for new applications, hence the lack of new applications or the reduction in new applications. But by adding all these other studies, I mean, what are we asking, and do we even recognize or understand what it is that we're asking for? So I'm just gonna I'm gonna ignore the split zone because it's hard for me to identify on the split zone. There's about a dozen or so, and there's more than 20 or more projects here that are on this list that are within ag. And actually, that brings me back to one of my other questions before I start talking about setbacks. I feel we need to have a conversation about APZ and TPZ. Those should only be for those that have a reduction in their property taxes because they are on timberland or ag land that have been deemed available for the Williamson Act. I'd like to know, are they still doing farming on that land outside of cannabis? Because cannabis is not an available crop for the Williamson Act. So I think that's a question that I think we should be getting an answer for. And it sounds like there might be an answer or at least some comment on that. But that was one of my remaining questions is I see we have close to a half dozen or more grows that are on APZ, and does it affect their APZ status? Are they still doing cattle grazing, or other types of agricultural activity, or is it just cannabis? Because cannabis is not covered.
We do not monitor them for Williamson Act as part of annual compliance monitoring for APZ. The state did rule a number of years ago that cannabis cultivation for commercial licenses was an acceptable act on Williamson Act lands. As far as TPZ, it's been a number of years since we've had any significant commercial forest harvesting in any TPZ property. But those properties remain in TPZ for the preservation of our forests.
So I don't have it right in front of me, but I know that I appreciate it that you shared the like the rules and regulation of Williamson Act or something along those lines. I forget like the uniform rules of the Williamson Act for Lake County. And it speaks very specifically about commodities and not ag product. And I think that's where it becomes very different, that an ag commodity is a federally recognized crop versus an ag product, which CDFA can state cannabis is an ag product, but it is not an ag commodity. So maybe that needs to be answered as far as what that does, because that's our uniform rules. And maybe if we wanted cannabis to fall within the APZ or within the Williamson Act, we need to review those rules, because those rules have not been changed in a very long time, because the last time we ever did anything with Williamson was 2012 and removed those that were inactive. But I think that is a question that I think we should have answered, because we shouldn't have people utilizing a reduction in property taxes if there's no activity or if there's no allowed activity that is happening on those properties. So I think in rural residential, those are typically going to be smaller lots. Already, if you're doing a 10,000 square foot, I think your minimum is 5 acres, if I'm correct, 10,000 square feet. Can you correct me if I'm wrong?
Sorry, Supervisor, can you repeat that question? I was actually just fixing my table with the last question that you had asked. And for confirmation, UP 1840 is in agricultural zoning.
Agriculture? Okay. I appreciate that. Anyways, I see here a minimum of 10,000 where it says 10,000, that it says minimum of 20 acres for type 2, 2AB, which is, I don't know if that's an updated number or not. I thought it was a lot less. I thought it was 1 acre. You needed to have 20 acres.
So there is a difference between outdoor and mixed light cultivation. For outdoor cultivation, it's a 20-to-1 ratio. You do have to have 20 acres for 1 acre of outdoor canopy. For mixed light, you must have 20 acres for 22,000 square feet of mixed light canopy.
Okay. I think that RR should be limited in the total canopy size, which I would suggest be 1 acre. And that the setbacks should be much larger than in the other areas, because that is meant for people to build residences in a more rural environment, typically outside of your typical community growth boundary. So I'm thinking 1 acre, 500 feet. Now, when I look at that, there's about, 5 or 6 that would be, about 3 that would look like they would be non-conforming. I'm going to skip RL because that one gets a little bit more complicated. But in ag, I'm sorry, it's ag. I'm happy to leave that at 200 with whatever our maximum happens to be. In RL, I'm looking for something in the middle, whether that's 300 feet, 250 feet. But RL is designated to be for agricultural commercial. And I would limit that to, and even though there are some in RL that are higher, there's 22 acres, there's 25 acres, one that's 39 acres. I think ag should be the one that's somewhat unlimited. It's ag, not unlimited. We have a maximum, but I think that saying, here's ag, grow ag, let me share with you your restrictions on doing ag, I'm just uncomfortable with that. If you choose to live in an ag environment, then you're going to have to live with what ag environments are. I keep bringing up sours. I had issues with the fact that people live in an agricultural area and are complaining about ag. But for the RL, it's going to have to be something in the middle. At least that's what I think it should be. I'm the 1,000 foot setback. I think somebody put us to the comment. It's basically, here's this law. No one's going to be able to meet it. So therefore, it's a law that just tells you you can't do the things that you want to do, or it'd be very, very limited in who can do those things. And I just don't agree with that. I want to go back to mixed light. Is mixed light supposed to be an engineered greenhouse?
Mixed light is required to be an engineered permanent structure greenhouse equipped with odor filtration systems.
So I'm going to reiterate what was reiterated in my last statement. I'm going to reiterate a public comment. It should not smell. Don't open up the windows. Figure out how to air it through a filter. Use whatever technology is available, and it shouldn't smell. And we're done. Moving on. So I think mixed light, if it smells, there's a violation. If they don't fix it, there's a fine. And we need to work in those ways. And then I do want to pose it. I know I have a white paper from our county council, and it was mentioned earlier, the right to farm. The right to farm is not automatic. The right to farm has to be the Board of Supervisors that decides to change, I believe it's Article 4, to add cannabis into the right to farm. It is not decided by the feds. It is a state rule for right to farm. The feds don't decide which state have the right to farm, but it is up to the locals to make some of those decisions. Now, maybe in some of the awkwardness and the conversations we're having where we're looking at some non-conforming, some conforming, does it make it easier if we also have the conversation simultaneously about the right to farm, saying, look, sorry about the non-conforming, but we're trying to make this be a permanent fixture of the future. Now you have the right to farm. You do 3 to 5 years worth of activity, like you're in. I don't know. But I think that if we don't have that conversation simultaneously, we're also ignoring the elephant in the room, where why is agriculture treated so differently than agriculture? Because that's what it is. It is a plant in the ground that you water, that you harvest, and you sell as a commercial product. We have to figure it out, and we can't ignore certain topics because they're uncomfortable. So, I mean, I'm offering that we look at potentially putting, I'm looking at less than 2 to 3% that would be non-conforming, and that sucks. But I also don't want to completely ignore the fact that it does smell, and we need to reduce that smell. But zoning should be what matters most, not this professional odor expert that's going to walk around with a giant nose telling us what's right, what's wrong. So hopefully that helps to start the conversation.
All right, go ahead, Supervisor Pyska.
Yeah, this is something along the lines I was thinking. This is a really difficult nut to crack, and we have so many microclimates and so much wildly different terrain and so many different communities. And I think having the smaller grows in the RRs makes sense because it is residential. I want to make sure as we're doing this work that we're also giving the ability for farmers to decide what they want to grow, because cannabis is ag. And we're seeing significant changes in agriculture. We're going to see a lot more shifting. And whatever we do, I don't want to restrict farmers to make decisions that they need to make. And if they are going to cull out their vineyards, and I know we can't accept any more applications at this time, but there's going to come a day when we're going to have that conversation. And the more work that we do now is going to make it easier if we decide to open this up again. Because if we've got a lot of ag land that goes fallow and can't be used for anything because farmers don't have the ability to grow what they want, we're going to have another set of problems.
All right, and I'm kind of on the same page with some of the same comments. If we're in a rural residential area, we've got to be able to not have the negative impacts on people that also live there that aren't growing. So I'm not sure what the exact right answer is on the setbacks, but I definitely think it's a different situation in the rural residential than it is in the straight ag zones. And I also feel that if these are indoor facilities and we have requirements that, there shouldn't be an odor, then they need to be held accountable to that. We have to enforce that or whatever we need to do.
Yeah.
So.
Can I just add something?
Yes, go ahead.
And I have asked Director Turner, and we've talked about this before, about the amount of odor complaints that we've received. And they're mostly for non-compliant grows or illegal grows. And I know, Mr. Wilson, you have this ongoing complaint with your neighbor. I know staff has been out there visiting. That is a situation that needs to be rectified because it is in a greenhouse and it's not compliant if you're being subjected to the odors there. There was another issue, I think it was 2 years ago in Kelseyville with the processing plant, that the neighbors were complaining the odor was all over Main Street. And so code enforcement went in there, they made changes. I don't think we've had complaints there since, correct? No, so there is a way to mitigate. And we do have these processing facilities, and that one was an old pear shed that's been converted. And it's very close to town, but within all the reasonable setbacks. So there is a way to do this. There's a way to handle it, and that these facilities and these greenhouses aren't going to be affecting neighbors.
Yes, thank you. Supervisor Owen?
I have a question. As just listening to everything and been listening to it for a while, it appears to me that a number of these issues that we have are actually written. I know that you had stated no because it was EIR on the odor at some point, but it does state that the odor should not be a nuisance. It's obviously a nuisance in some areas, and it's not being addressed. So compliance seems to be one of the bigger issues. So I'd like to ask, do you have the ability to monitor and enforce our already requirements that are on the books? Because, for instance, Mr. Wilson, he's a perfect example, and I don't remember how many years he's been putting up with this, but it's been a long time. We'd had one down in Middletown, the same thing, where they were running him out of water, and that he had went clear to the Supreme Court and got a judgment, and it still wasn't being taken care of. So do we, as community service department, have the ability to monitor and to enforce the bad players?
Since most of the complaints that we get for odor are for unpermitted grows, we route that through code enforcement or law enforcement. And so that's how we take care of those. We don't get a lot of complaints, if any, on our permitted outdoor grows. The indoor, or the ones in greenhouses, actually, the discussions that we had with the air pollution control officer were very helpful because he reminded us that air filtration requires an air quality permit. So we're looking into that now, specific to odor complaints for permitted indoor or greenhouse grows. We'll make sure that that's clear in the conditions going forward, as well as enforced in past ones as well. So far, since we aren't getting any complaints from licensed cannabis permits, we have not had the need to do any management or to address those because we're just not getting them. But we are actively looking at strengthening the no odor from structures.
Thank you.
Supervisor Crandall?
Yes, if the conditions of approval were being looked into, would whoever's inspecting those conditions of approval, wouldn't, especially regarding smell or odor, they would be able to actually determine that once going out to inspect? The odor control. So if there's conditions of approval and then they go out and check to see if they're in compliance, there would be a natural opportunity for someone to inspect or see or determine if there's an odor or if there's an odor control?
Odor is something that is, again, subjective, but staff does arrive. We roll windows down prior to our arrival when we're coming close to the site to determine if there is an off-site odor as we approach. One thing that's important to discuss here that I don't think has been brought up, and this was discussed during the Cannabis Ordinance Task Force, is that a standard practice in greenhouse cultivation is to vent the greenhouses. So it's important for the board to recognize that and either eliminate that practice within cultivation or to allow these people to vent, but also follow the air quality requirements put forth with Doug Gearhart's department. when we do find odor on site, we look at the issues as we're approaching, as we're entering. Is it during processing for an indoor operation, or how far away do we begin to smell the odors for outdoor? And then we address it. And then again, odor is subject to change with time of day, with wind direction. So it's really hard when we get these odor complaints and code enforcement does go to respond to these, and they're not smelling the same objectionable odors that were reported. So that is a difficulty that we are having.
Would they determine also, like if there's a complaint in OpenGov or previously before it would be somewhere else, that would be something they inspect as well?
So yes, we look at all complaints that are through any complaint-based system, whether it be Acela or OpenGov. We look at the record in its entirety for the parcel, including building permits and code enforcement complaints, not just the planning record. And then we'll identify the issues for follow-up as needed and note them on the inspection report.
Because I'm hearing that the complaints are mostly about illicit grows, is from what I understand. But who determines if the complaint on OpenGov or anywhere else, who determines that the complaint is valid or invalid?
That would be code enforcement that would respond.
Okay, that's all I was just asking. Another thing I wanted to mention, I know Pat Sullivan had come up and talked about a specific amount. I don't know, did we determine what we were going to do on that, or what we thought would be ideal?
Haven't talked about it yet.
Okay. I mean, am I jumping out of, because I don't know where are we going in chronological order, or I just felt like asking you that question as well about odor since we're talking about it. And I do like the idea about zoning as well. I do appreciate hearing that, because when you were talking about the San Bernardino instance, I was like, yeah, San Bernardino is a different area, but at the same time, we have such a smaller type of area when it comes to some of the communities, especially in my district. But then there's also areas like in Witter Springs, in those areas where it's a little more, it's less inhibited with different living quarters, whereas you have like community growth boundaries in other areas. So I do like the zoning aspect. I think we'll probably have our own thoughts about the distance, but I'm willing to look at that. I think for me, you mentioned 25%.
No, I did.
She did.
You did? And then I know Supervisor Pyska, you mentioned that as well, or is that the state? You said something like
I
that.
said
was
something about the state, but the tax collector didn't agree with that. So
No?
I'm okay with looking at a percentage. It's fine. I think we need to establish something so that his office isn't overburdened unnecessarily.
I'm on board with 25% or whatever we can compromise with. Well, we'll talk about the distances when you're ready to go through each zone, I guess.
All right. Supervisor Spatier?
And just to be argumentative, the percentage, I mean, should we also put a minimum number of days that Airbnbs are working, so that the amount of time our tax collector is working to figure out who rented what, and that it's worth their time? Like, where do we go with what we force on businesses? And if we're forcing it on one business type, then why aren't we enforcing that on all business types? That's where I struggle. So I'm going to continue to struggle to say that you must, or else you lose your permit. It's a big struggle for me.
No, they can opt out.
So for 2 years, and then you lose your permit.
Right.
But anyways, I just want to mention, so I put the whole spreadsheet that you provided as a PDF in a spreadsheet so I can go through it and see what happens. There is one split RLRR that is 280 feet, is the closest residence off-site. Other than that, if you look at the other just RRs, it's 200, 450, and then it goes to 520. So at this moment, potentially, if we said 500 feet, there would be 3 plus one that is more than an acre that is only on RR that would be non-conforming. If we get rid of the 10 years, that means you can remain. You just can't upgrade your farm without bringing it to compliance. And I am okay with that, rather than kicking anybody out right now by taking the rug from under their feet, but also pushing forward with a better way to protect that environment within that zone. And again, the split is going to be something different that I'm just not sure which property we're looking at. Was the RL added into the total acreage and everything's happening on the RR or on the ag? It looks like you're saying no, but that's going to be important for us to be able to map out and really see, identify who would be non-conforming based on any rule that we decide to go with. I'm looking at RL. There's about there are 7 that are under 300 feet of the closest residence, and there are 14 that are less than 500 feet from the residence. I think that RL should not be equal to RR. I think it should be less of a setback, but there are a total of 74 projects solely in RL. I'd like to offer 300 feet and just see what that looks like and go from there. And again, our largest grows are in RL. I think that that puts me a little bit uneasy to start limiting the acreage on RL, because RL is your starting point for full-on ag until you get to A or APZ. I think that leaving it at 200 on ag is okay with me, but we need to see fines for those that don't meet our requirements for odor control when there's an odor control that is required. I think zoning is the only way to respond to odor control for outdoor, because any given day could be a new complaint because we have 100-mile-an-hour winds. We have super hot days where it's just falling down on the ground instead of flying in the air. Like, there's just such a minute-to-minute scenario on outdoor that if we don't zone it correctly, we can't put a what do we say, an olfactory meter type of thing. Like, that's going to say one day you're good, one day you're bad, and it's going to depend what day we choose to go out there to check it out, and then we're going to keep having the argument. So I also think that if you're completely outdoor, it's less concentrated versus mixed light. I'm not in your field. I'm not in your industry. But there's got to be a way to circulate air without having to open up the windows, and that's highly concentrated stuff if you're opening it up after it's been sitting there in a greenhouse environment. So hopefully that will reduce the number of complaints, but that's what I'm offering, at least to get us started on the setbacks and the acreage.
May I confirm that I understand you correctly then? For rural residential zoning district, 1 acre max canopy outdoor, with a 500-foot setback from nearest offsite residence. Rural lands, 20-acre maximum canopy, though you are questioning the 20-acre maximum canopy, and 300 feet from offsite residence. Agriculture, also 20-acre, not sure if that's being questioned, but a 200-foot from nearest offsite residence. And then APZ would be treated like ag. TPZ would be treated like, I'm not sure yet. You haven't. I'm not clear on that one.
Probably just like ag.
Like ag? Okay, great.
And just to iterate, the largest grow we have on here is 39 acres, 32.4, 25 acres, 25 and 22 acres are on RL, 39 is split ag RL.
And then minimum canopy, 25% of overall total canopy approved on any reduced canopy year. I heard 2 supports on that one, but I haven't heard a third.
State that again. What was that?
25% of total approved canopy being the minimum amount to cultivate during a reduced canopy year.
I think that's high.
I guess it depends if you have the 39 acres or if you have the 5,000 square feet.
Yeah, I think 25% is high. I'm okay with the percent, but I'm 10% would be fine with me. It seems high. If someone's making that decision to reduce for a lot of reasons, that's still pretty high to require somebody to grow.
What you don't want is one plant, right? Is that
What I don't want is one plant.
I mean, I could go with the 10%.
I think we're being extreme in our one plant. That'd be like $10,000 to grow one plant.
Well,
It's like my tomatoes in my garden that cost me $5 a tomato. I still eat them, but I'm not trying to make a profit off it either.
it probably costs more than $5. But while I'm just listening to what the tax collector has to say,
That's what I was going to ask.
maybe we need to ask that department, and he's not here, or other staff, like what is the threshold where it makes sense, and where is it going to overburden or
The burden on staff is the same.
Matthew?
As far as community development goes, because we're still performing the annual site monitoring visit. We just verified the amount that they said that they were going to cultivate.
Okay, well, maybe we should check in with the tax collector's office and see what their burden is. He's not here.
One quick filler. I remember jotting this down last time. In the whereas, including tribal representation and participation on the Cannabis Ordinance Task Force. I think when
We did have tribal
Oh, you
representation.
did? Okay, good. You did. I'm sorry. I
And
never-
also all of these permits are discretionary, so we do include, as Mr. Bill was talking about, we do include tribal consultation when requested.
Right. I think we talked about that in the TIPO meeting as well.
Just for clarity, when requested, not by the applicant, but by
the tribes.
By the
Yeah,
tribes.
SB
when it's
18
put out
requires
there.
us to
I
send
just-
notification out.
I know what the answer was, but I just thought I'd clarify that just in case somebody took it wrong.
I have a question. Did you state 200-foot square setback on the our rural lands, our rural residential, and what was your setback on all the others?
I was offering 500 for rural residential, 300 on rural lands, and stick to 200 on APZ, TPZ, and ag.
Okay, I'd like to see a little increase on those.
What's your suggestion?
I'm going to say a 500.
On which? On all?
RL?
Which?
Yeah, on all.
On every single one of them?
Mm-hmm. I know that there's going to be some non-compliant, legal non-compliance.
That would be 29 out of the 116, or yeah, 116 permits that would be out of compliance. And that includes some that are as small as 3,600 square feet to much larger.
So those would be current.
That's what we had talked about earlier on when we first started dealing with this. We were saying, I remember the board kind of had consensus at that time, 500 to 1,000 feet. So I'm kind of going with the lesser of those two options. And that's what I recall us talking about at that time.
I would be uncomfortable on, again, the places that's where ag belongs, to actually increase it to that much.
Yeah, I agree on the ag. That would be a little too high for ag zones.
I didn't think I was going to win this. I'm just telling you what I want.
I'll meet you halfway. I'm good with it except for ag. I'll compromise with the others on ag, but I'll go with you on the other two.
On rural lands?
Yeah. I'm willing to compromise in that too, but I mean, I'll stand with her so she's not alone.
I'm kind of used to being alone. Thank you, EJ.
There's Pat.
Can we ask you a question, Pat?
Perfect timing. Yes.
We're trying to, so there's a discussion on if they reduce and what percentage it would be. We're not really sure what makes sense on that. Can you weigh in on that, or would you have any
you had
advice
a-
you could offer?
If you had a recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think I've heard of 50% before, but I realize that may be too high. I think 25% of the permitted area might make sense if that's a happier medium, but I guess I'd hope it would be a substantial amount. I wouldn't want to see people reducing down to 5% of their total, permitted values or 10%. Then it does feel we are aware of parties who are basically keeping the permit and the license active for the purpose of real estate gains or transactions. And though these ones do trigger work, like I said, there is a basic amount of work that goes in, whether someone's growing 10 square feet or 100,000 square feet. So I would just hope it would be a substantial amount, a meaningful amount.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Supervisor.
Well, you can stay right there if you could.
Okay, sure.
I'm not in favor of that, but what I would suggest is it should be a minimum square footage, not a percentage. Because, 5% of 39 acres, you're still getting 1.45 acres out of the whole thing. That's not a small piece of acreage at all. But if you're talking about 5% of 5,000 square feet, all of a sudden that's very small. So maybe a minimum of 1,000 square feet or a minimum of, as was mentioned earlier, 25. I'm not in favor of it, but I think it's ridiculous to do percentage when we go from 0.2 acres all the way to 39 acres, and a percentage of that is forcing 50% would force somebody to still grow 14 acres, or sorry, 39 divided by 2, 19 acres. Not good at math on the fly. That's a substantial amount to force somebody to continue just so they don't practice a real estate game with us, which I still think we get paid for the process.
I do understand your point there, especially because a flat rate, frankly, is probably easier for all departments involved to monitor, I would think, rather than dealing with percentage. I think the concern I have is that there can be such a variance, right? Like a 40,000 square foot, a 1 acre farm, or, somebody with a 20,000 square foot approved grow that drops to 1,000 versus someone with 1 million square feet that's authorized and drops it down to 1,000 square feet. I know we don't have caps yet, but I can also imagine there could be an impact in certain areas. Whenever we get to the point where there's all this unused square footage and we don't really have a picture of what things are really going to look like, that may come into play later. So I would be in favor of percentage simply because I think we probably wouldn't have to revisit it again. But at this point in time, a square foot cap, if that's easier for everyone, I would say that's probably okay. Something's better than nothing. But for me, I would want it to be a substantial or a meaningful amount for the permit. And my fear would be on the larger permits, it just wouldn't be a meaningful amount, and people would potentially be gaming the system. But I understand the perspective.
Okay. Anything further?
That was helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Sounds like we're going to have this conversation yet again. So maybe you could work with the office, the tax collector's office, to find out something that would be a good recommendation.
If I understand correctly, then we would have a discussion with treasurer tax collector regarding the minimum amount of acreage that would substantiate or pay for their services.
Twist their
during
arm?
tax.
Is that what we're doing?
Well, so that
curious.
the treasurer tax collector's office would not be losing money on the time it takes for them to process the tax.
Right.
That sounds like where we would land as a minimum. Okay, we'll
Yes.
do that.
Yep.
So back to setbacks.
So if what was suggested by Supervisor Crandall, that RL and RR were set at 500 feet and one of them I don't know. It's actually I do know because it's RLRR. It would be 17 out of the 117 that would be non-conforming, give or take.
Yeah, I think for RL, that's too high. They're, these are large parcels. They're out in rural areas. And I think that impacts the right to use their land.
I don't think all of them are in rural areas.
The
I mean,
RLs?
The RLs, not all of them are in, maybe the ones that are on here, but not all rural lands are out in rural areas, is what I'm saying, right?
I don't disagree.
There's some that are, yeah.
So you were okay with the 300 feet that was up? I think that was the number that you offered Supervisor Sabatier.
I'm good with 300.
Well, starting with the first one, I think we had consensus on the 500
On the RR.
for RR. Is that? Yeah, so we're good there.
Great.
So let's go take them one by one. So now we don't have consensus on the RL. We've got between 300 and 500 feet out here that we're trying to figure out.
Well, we can do it by vote. I can offer the 500 and see if we get 3 votes. And if we don't, then we can offer the 300.
Well, for consensus,
Thumbs.
yeah, so you're
500.
asking for 500, and I don't see.
And this is
consensus.
RL.
Oh, yeah.
This is RL.
Put your thumb up.
I'm just,
We
I
have-
need 2.
Get your thumb.
There you go.
I didn't hear you say that. I thought you said something else.
So we had two on that, so the other number was 300, which I feel more comfortable with on that piece. So your supervisor offered it, so he's good, so we have consensus there. So now we're down to the ag land, which the original number out there was 200.
I agreed to that earlier. I said it, so I don't want to crawfish.
Okay.
I don't want to go backwards. I said I'd agree to that, but I'll go with the 5 on the other 2, so I'll go with that.
Crawfish
We'll go
like a
with
turtle.
200 on
Going
that.
backwards. Sorry. I learned it from Tombstone. Sorry.
So I think we have consensus 200 on ag.
Super. And then outstanding are a couple things. 1 acre maximum canopy for RR.
Yeah, I believe that's where we're
I
at.
see consensus on that. And prohibition
Go
of
ahead.
venting
Hang on.
greenhouses.
I just wanted to make sure that TPZ and APZ was part of the ag conversation.
That's my understanding.
Just wanted to clarify and make sure.
Yes.
There was discussion on prohibition of venting greenhouses. That's new. We haven't talked about that before.
As far as I'm concerned,
Can
it's
we
a
back up
greenhouse
just
to
a little
keep the
bit?
Smell in.
Real quick.
Yeah.
The ag preserve and then timber preserve, is there anything in the law for those zonings that would prohibit this?
No.
Or
The
would
state has made,
put a monkey wrench?
in fact, I'd be happy to furnish that to the board if it would be helpful in the Williamson Act conversation specifically, the decisions by the state regarding cannabis cultivation in APZ.
Okay, that's what I was asking legally. Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
Supervisor Pyska,
Oh, we were talking about the venting.
Yes.
you had a question.
And so now we've learned that the greenhouses need a air quality permit. Is that right?
Structures that use air filtration systems require an air quality permit for their air filtration system.
And so if they're venting, is that venting? gonna
No,
go
that's not the
through-
same thing.
Okay.
Venting just means you're opening up the windows on your greenhouse.
Right, and that's impacting people.
We are not getting complaints
Is that
on our
the
permitted
issue with
grows.
Mr. Wilson?
We're not sure yet. I don't know that they're venting on purpose as a greenhouse because they have a solid structure.
Okay, I don't know then.
They're venting.
I think there are fan systems, there are filtration systems. I get it. They want to reduce the heat because it's in a greenhouse, then, you know, sorry to the people who don't like the odor, but grow outdoor if you don't want to have the appropriate mixed light greenhouse that can be self-contained. That's the way that I look at it.
Yeah, I agree that's got to be controlled indoor and figure out enforcing that.
Now,
Go ahead.
on the, any grow or houses, do they need to be, let me find my notes. Whether they're packing or whether they're growing, do they need to go to fire code and have the sprinklers? And is there any exceptions to that? And the filtrations, et cetera?
If I understand your question, you're asking about fire code requirements for processor structures?
Yes.
Or any
Whether it be
like
growing or-
on-site processing for outdoor cultivation?
Yeah, for any of them.
I'll defer this.
Like, I believe is a type F building?
Sure. So a type F occupancy, according to chief building official, this is secondhand knowledge, so forgive me if I misspeak. But the occupancy is for new structures, and it does require sprinkler systems. Existing structures, it depends on the occupancy as to whether a sprinkler system would be required as an upgrade.
And then any of the new will also require the filtration systems? The air quality?
So it really depends on how projects are proposed to us. The only requirement for odor filtration system is within the farmland protection zone. That is the only requirement for that. Now, processing facilities, we would anticipate they would have air filtration because they do have an odor management plan that would control odors, and they do. But the only written requirement within the specific black and white regulation is odor filtration within greenhouses and farmland protection zone.
And that, should that be expanded to all of them rather than just be in farmland protection?
That would be up to the board.
Thank you.
Supervisor Pyska.
Yeah, going back to the greenhouse venting, if the greenhouse is in the middle of nowhere, no one's around, and there's no offsite residential buildings, then why does it matter? So maybe there's a setback.
So this was actually brought to staff's attention during Cannabis Ordinance Task Force. I am not a cannabis cultivator, so I was not aware that venting is a thing. Going out and, responding to odor complaints, the greenhouses are closed, the vents are closed, so we're not experiencing the same odors at the time that they're being emitted by the venting. So it's kind of hard to track. With that, we've requested any type of odor logs that could be helpful in us pinpointing timeframes in which these activities are occurring. That way code enforcement can respond.
Go ahead, Supervisors.
I think because odor is subjective and that this is a engineered, manufactured building, I think we make sure it doesn't smell. And venting obviously will lead to a smell. And if we start dissecting where you are, how far back the next house is, we're probably still going to get a complaint at one point or another. And I just think that we have an amazing climate for growing cannabis here. And if it is too difficult for you to do mixed light in a completely enclosed building, then maybe that wasn't a wise business decision.
Perhaps the board would like to table that particular issue to Article 73, given that that was not part of today's agenda. So the public has not had time to really prepare a response for that public input.
I'm fine with that. I just don't know enough.
What
And
I'd
during
like,
that time, we would gather more information.
and I'm not really all, I mean, I know it's 4 years in the making, I know. But I would like to come back, not necessarily for a first reading, but really showing us who's non-conforming, who's conforming based on all these discussions that we've had. because mapping it out and really seeing what the impact will be, I think is a vital part of what we're doing, because that is walking on eggshells on someone's potential livelihood. And so I just think it's an important process to step by step, let's see who's getting impacted by any of our decisions before we really bring on a first reading that kind of potentially forces us to say, yes, move forward.
That sounds great, because now that we have more solidified setbacks, we can take a look at also our pending projects.
Okay.
I would request a continuance on this item then to earliest May 5th, which would give us a week to confer with the treasurer tax collector and finish our staff report
Not May 5th,
for next week.
after May 5th.
After,
Go ahead, CAO.
Yes, the two, am I on? Yes, okay. So May 5th, we are missing a board member. 28th, we're missing a board member. The next available date would be May 12th.
Works for me.
Yeah, that works.
if Johanna could give us a time, that would be awesome. Yes, it's going to be this long.
Always.
Great.
1 o'clock on May 12th.
Thank you very much. This has been very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further? And we're going to take a short break.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, CAO.
just on this item,
Yes.
thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on this item, just to confirm, this would be a continuance of the public hearing for the still technically first reading of the ordinance. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so your board would want to make a motion to that effect because it is usually it's done by, so it would be a motion to continue the first reading.
I'm actually kind of uncomfortable with what I just heard. There's no way this was close to a first reading, so we're not really continuing a first reading, and I would prefer that the notification to the public is with the full ordinance of what it would be, because that's not what was submitted to the public.
Only going by the caption, other option for your board, because right now it's captioned as public hearing consideration of an ordinance. Granted, the ordinance actually was not posted, but the substance of the ordinance, of course, was referenced in the memo. Now, as an alternative to your board may just vacate, withdraw the first reading, the public hearing itself, the public hearing aspect, so that no notices would need to be sent out for the May 12th date, and just provide direction to staff to come back on May 12th with whatever they have to present pursuant to your board's direction today, May 12, 1 p.m. And that can be done by direction to staff.
I would prefer it that way. That way the notification is very clear as to what the first reading is, because what was submitted now, I'm not sure would be clear at all unless you're following the bouncing ball of all these meetings that we're having where changes are being made.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may, so just to clarify, May 12th at 1 p.m., that would not be a first reading. It's basically presentation and consideration of what staff has pursuant to your board's directions to them today.
Correct.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
So it looks like we have consensus.
Yes.
Okay, we're good then? Get out of here. All right.